The sun had barely cracked the horizon when Helena Kimball stepped into the barn and found her prize milk cow lying dead in the straw, its belly grotesquely swollen and flies already gathering in the summer heat of New Mexico territory. She stood frozen for a moment, her heart sinking like a stone dropped in a well. This was the third animal her neighbor Marcus Thorne had poisoned in as many months, and everyone in Colfax knew it, but proving it was another matter entirely when the man owned half the town's council and most of its land. Helena was 22 years old and had been running her family's small ranch alone since her father died from fever 2 years prior. Her mother had passed when she was just a girl, leaving her with memories of songs and the smell of bread baking. The ranch was modest, just 40 acres with a creek running through it, but it was hers, and she would sooner die than let Marcus Thorne intimidate her into selling. He wanted her water rights, wanted to expand his empire of cattle and cruelty, but Helena had her father's stubbornness running through her veins like iron in rock. She forced herself to move, to turn away from the dead cow and walk to the smaller pen where she kept her remaining dairy cow, Betsy. The animal lowed softly as Helena approached with her bucket and stool. Her hands trembled as she settled beside the cow, but she steadied them through sheer will. She had learned long ago that fear was a luxury she could not afford. As the first streams of milk hit the bucket with their rhythmic ping, Helena found herself humming. It was an old tune her mother used to sing, something about morning light and new beginnings. She did not realize she was doing it at first, but once she noticed, she kept going. The melody was a small defiance against the darkness trying to swallow her whole. If Marcus Thorne thought he could break her spirit along with her livelihood, he had another thing coming. The milk flowed steadily, and Helena's humming grew stronger, filling the barn with something that felt almost like hope. The tune was sweet and old, passed down through generations, and it reminded her of better times when her father was alive, and the ranch felt less like a burden and more like a gift. She did not hear the footsteps approaching until a deep voice joined her song, harmonizing with her melody in a warm baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. Helena's hands stilled on the cow's teats, and she turned sharply to find a stranger standing in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the growing dawn light. He was tall, with broad shoulders and the lean build of a man who spent his life in the saddle. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and his face was handsome in a weathered way, with strong features and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore dusty trail clothes and had a bedroll tied to his back, and there was something in his stance that spoke of both strength and gentleness. "I apologize for startling you, miss," he said, removing his hat. "I heard the song and could not help myself. My mother used to sing that same tune when I was a boy." Helena stood slowly, keeping the bucket between them like a shield. "This is private property. Who are you?" "Name is Kade Zimmerman, madam. I was riding through and saw your sign down by the road, the one advertising for ranch work. I know it is early, but I have been traveling through the night and thought I would stop." She studied him carefully, noting the honest look in his eyes and the respectful way he kept his distance. She desperately needed help, especially now with another cow dead, but trusting strangers in this territory was a dangerous game. "I posted that sign 3 weeks ago. I cannot pay much." "I am not looking for much," Kade said. "Just honest work and a place to lay my head. I can handle cattle, mend fences, break horses, whatever you need." There was something about his voice, the way it had blended with her humming, that made Helena want to trust him. She was not a foolish woman who believed in signs from above, but the timing of his arrival felt like more than coincidence. "I will give you a week's trial. Room and board plus $2. If you work out, we can discuss a permanent arrangement. Kade's face broke into a smile that transformed his features from merely handsome to something that made Helena's breath catch in her throat. That is more than fair, Miss Kimball. You will not regret it. How did you know my name? It is on your sign. Helena Kimball, Ranch Help Wanted. She nodded, feeling foolish for the question. The bunkhouse is behind the main house. It is nothing fancy, but it is clean and dry. Get yourself settled and then come to the house for breakfast. We have a lot to discuss. As Kade walked away to tend to his horse, Helena returned to her milking with a strange flutter in her chest. She resumed her humming, and though the stranger was no longer in earshot, she could still hear his baritone in her memory, the way their voices had twined together like rope being woven. By the time she finished milking and carried the bucket to the house, the sun was fully up, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and pink. She could see Kade leading his horse to the barn, his movements efficient and confident. He handled the animal with obvious care, speaking to it in low tones that she could not make out, but that seemed to calm the travel-weary creature. Helena went inside and started breakfast, frying eggs and salt pork, making coffee strong enough to strip paint. Her kitchen was small but orderly, with her mother's blue china still displayed on the shelf her father had built. She set 2 plates at the rough wooden table and was just dishing up the food when Kade knocked on the door frame. "Come in," she called, and he entered, having washed the trail dust from his face and hands at the pump. His hair was damp and combed back, and up close, she could see he was perhaps 25 or 26, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often despite the hardness of life. They ate in silence at first, the kind that was not uncomfortable but rather companionable, as if they had shared many meals before. Helena watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the way he ate with good manners but obvious hunger. Finally, she pushed her plate back and folded her hands on the table. "I should be straight with you about what you are getting into," she said. "My neighbor, Marcus Thorne, wants this land. He has been making trouble for months. Poisoned cattle, cut fences, run off horses. Last month, someone took shots at me while I was riding fence line. Could not prove it was him, but I know it was." Kade's expression darkened. "Why does the law not intervene?" "The law in Colfax is Sheriff Porter, and he is in Thorne's pocket. Most everyone in town is, either through debt or fear. Thorne owns the general store, the saloon, and half the ranches in this valley. He is not accustomed to being told no. Why not sell? Take your money and start fresh somewhere else." Helena's eyes flashed. "Because this is my home. My father cleared this land, built that house with his own hands. My mother is buried on the hill overlooking the creek. I will not be driven off by a bully, no matter how powerful he thinks he is." Kade nodded slowly, respect clear in his gaze. "Then I reckon you need someone who is not afraid of bullies. I have dealt with men like Thorne before. They are all bluster until someone stands up to them." "This is not your fight," Helena said, though part of her desperately wanted him to disagree. "You offered me work, and I accepted. That makes it my fight." He met her eyes steadily. "Besides, any man who poisons animals and shoots at women deserves to be taught some manners." They spent the rest of the morning surveying the ranch. Helena showed Kade the fence lines that needed mending, the corral that needed new posts, the irrigation ditches that needed clearing. She explained her system for rotating the cattle through different pastures and showed him where the hay meadow grew lush near the creek. He listened carefully, asking intelligent questions and offering suggestions that showed he truly knew ranch work. As they walked, Helena found herself stealing glances at him. There was something solid about Kade Zimmerman, something that made her feel less alone for the first time in 2 years. The way he had joined her song that morning kept replaying in her mind, the natural harmony of their voices intertwining. "That song," she said finally, as they paused by the creek to water their horses. "You said your mother sang it." "Every morning while she made breakfast," Kade said, his voice soft with memory. "She died when I was 15. Fever took her quick. My father followed within the year, just gave up without her. I have been on my own since then, moving from ranch to ranch, never quite feeling like I belonged anywhere." He looked at her, and something in his eyes made her heart skip. "Until I heard you singing this morning." Helena swallowed hard, unsure how to respond to the intensity of his gaze. "I am glad you stopped," she said finally. "I do believe you arriving when you did was good timing." "So do I," Kade said quietly. They worked together through the afternoon, and Helena was impressed by Kade's skill and work ethic. He could indeed handle horses, gentle even the skittish mare that had been giving Helena trouble for weeks. He mended a section of fence in half the time it would have taken her, and he did it well, with tight wire and solid posts. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Helena called a halt to the work. "Come to the house for supper," she said. "I make a decent stew, and we should discuss what needs doing tomorrow." Over bowls of venison stew and fresh bread, they talked more easily than Helena had talked to anyone in months. Kade shared stories of his travels, the ranches he had worked, the characters he had met along the way. He had a way of telling stories that brought them to life, using his hands for emphasis and changing his voice for different characters. Helena found herself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "You have a good laugh," Kade said, watching her with warm eyes. "You should do it more often." "I have not had much cause to lately," Helena admitted. "Running this place alone, dealing with thorn, it wears on a person." "You will not be alone anymore," Kade said simply, and the way he said it made it sound like a promise. That night, lying in her bed in the small room off the kitchen, Helena stared at the ceiling and thought about the cowboy sleeping in her bunkhouse. She barely knew him, yet somehow he felt familiar, like someone she had been waiting for without realizing it. The memory of their voices harmonizing in the barn that morning played over and over in her mind, and she fell asleep with a small smile on her face. She was up again at dawn, as always, and when she went to milk Betsy, she found Kade already in the barn mucking out the stalls. He looked up as she entered and smiled. "Morning, Miss Kimball." "Helena," she said. "If we are going to be working together, you might as well call me Helena." "Helena," he repeated, and the way her name sounded in his voice made warmth spread through her chest. "And you should call me Kade." She settled onto her stool and began to milk, and after a moment she started humming that same old tune. This time, she was not surprised when Kade's voice joined hers, and their voices blended even more naturally than they had the day before, as if they had been singing together for years instead of days. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. They would work side by side during the day, repairing the damage Thorne's sabotage had caused and improving the ranch bit by bit. In the evenings, they would share meals and conversation, and Helena found herself looking forward to those quiet hours more than anything else. Kade was easy to talk to, and he listened in a way that made her feel truly heard. She learned that he had been a soldier briefly during the tail end of the Civil War, though he had been just a boy at the time. He had seen things he did not like to talk about, and afterward, he had drifted west, looking for something he could not quite name. He had worked ranches in Texas and Colorado, saved lives during a flash flood in Kansas, and once tracked a stolen herd through a blizzard for 3 days straight. "Why did you never settle down?" Helena asked one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the stars come out. Never found the right place, Kade said. Or maybe I never found the right person to make a place feel like home. He looked at her, and in the starlight his eyes were dark and deep. Until now. Helena's breath caught in her throat. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken feelings. She had been aware of the growing attraction between them, the way her heart raced when he stood close, the way his hand would linger on hers when he helped her over rough ground. But this was the first time either of them had acknowledged it aloud. "Kade," she said softly, not sure what else to say. He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and gentle. "I know it has only been a few weeks, but I have never felt this way before. Like I have been looking for you my whole life without knowing it." "I feel it too," Helena whispered. "But it is complicated. Thorn is still a threat, and who knows what he will do if he realizes I have someone helping me now." "Let him come," Kade said, his voice firm. "I am not afraid of him, and I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me, Helena Kimball." She squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I am glad," she said. "So very glad." They sat in comfortable silence after that, holding hands and watching the stars wheel overhead. Helena felt something shift inside her, like a door she had kept locked for years finally opening. She had been so focused on survival, on keeping the ranch running and fending off Thorn's attacks, that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be cared for. The peace did not last. 2 days later, Helena and Kade rode into Colfax to buy supplies. The town was small, just a main street with a handful of buildings clustered around it. The general store was owned by Marcus Thorn, but it was the only place for 50 miles to buy necessities, so Helena had no choice but to give him her business. They tied their horses outside the store and went in. The proprietor, a thin man named Samuel who managed the store for Thorn, nodded nervously at Helena. His eyes widened when he saw Kade beside her. "Miss Kimball," Samuel said, "I did not know you had hired help." "There is a lot you do not know, Samuel," Helena said pleasantly. "I need flour, salt, coffee, and ammunition for my rifle." Samuel began gathering the items, his hands shaking slightly. Helena was counting out money when the door opened behind them, and she felt the temperature in the room drop. She did not need to turn around to know Marcus Thorn had entered. "Well, well," Thorn's voice was smooth as oil and twice as slippery. "Miss Kimball, I heard you had a stranger working for you now." Helena turned slowly. Marcus Thorn was a large man, running to fat but still powerful, with cold blue eyes and a mouth that never smiled in a way that reached those eyes. He was perhaps 45, dressed in expensive clothes more suited to a city than a frontier town. 2 men flanked him, hired guns with hard faces and tied-down holsters. "What I do on my ranch is my business, Mr. Thorn," Helena said evenly. "Now, Helena, we have been over this," Thorn said, stepping closer. "A woman alone cannot manage a ranch properly. It is only natural that you would need help, but hiring drifters is not the answer. The smart thing would be to accept my offer. I will pay you fair price, and you could move to Santa Fe, live like a lady instead of working yourself to death. I have told you before, my ranch is not for sale." Thorn's eyes shifted to Kade, who had been standing quietly but with an alertness that suggested he was ready for trouble. "I do not believe we have met. I am Marcus Thorn. I own most of this valley." "Kade Zimmerman," Kade said, not offering his hand. "I work for Miss Kimball. Is that so?" Thorn's smile was predatory. "Well, Mr. Zimmerman, I hope Miss Kimball is paying you well, because employment with her tends to be short-lived. Accidents happen with alarming frequency on that ranch." "Accidents," Kade said, his voice flat. "That is an interesting way to describe poisoned cattle and gunshots." The air in the store went tense. Thorn's face hardened, and his men shifted their stances. "That is a serious accusation, boy. You want to be careful about throwing words like that around." "It is only an accusation if it is not true," Kade said calmly, "and I tend to call things as I see them." Thorn stared at Kade for a long moment, and Helena could see him reassessing, calculating. "You are new here, so you do not understand how things work. Let me educate you. This valley is mine. Every ranch, every business, every person answers to me. Those who cooperate prosper. Those who do not," he shrugged, "well, they tend to find life here difficult." "Is that a threat?" Kade asked. "It is a fact," Thorn said. "Miss Kimball has been stubborn, but I am a patient man. However, my patience is not infinite. You would be wise to move on before you get caught up in something that is none of your concern." "Helena's concerns are my concerns," Kade said, and the way he used her first name did not go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Thorn's eyes narrowed, and he looked between Kade and Helena with new understanding. "I see. Well, that does complicate matters, does it not?" He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day, Miss Kimball. Mr. Zimmerman. I do hope nothing unfortunate befalls either of you." He swept out of the store, his men following, and Helena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Samuel finished packing their supplies with trembling hands, refusing to meet her eyes. "Thank you, Samuel," Helena said quietly, gathering the parcels. Outside, as they loaded the supplies onto their horses, Kade's jaw was tight. "That man is poison. I told you," Helena said. "And now he knows about you, about us." She blushed slightly at the admission. "He will come after you too now." "Good," Kade said. "Better he focuses on me than you." They rode back to the ranch in silence, both lost in thought. Helena was worried, but she was also grateful. For the first time since her father died, she did not feel like she was facing her troubles alone. That night, Kade insisted on sleeping in the barn rather than the bunkhouse, wanting to be closer in case of trouble. Helena did not argue. She lay in her bed, listening to the night sounds, and felt safer knowing he was nearby. 3 nights later, trouble came. Helena woke to the smell of smoke. She bolted from her bed, grabbing her rifle, and ran outside in her nightgown. The barn was on fire, flames already licking up the sides. Her heart stopped. Kade was in there. "Kade!" she screamed, running toward the burning structure. He burst out of the barn leading both horses, his face blackened with soot, coughing. Behind him, Betsy the cow lowed in panic. Without thinking, Kade thrust the horse's reins at Helena and ran back into the flames. "No!" Helena screamed, but he was already gone. Seconds that felt like hours passed. Helena stood frozen, her heart hammering so hard she thought it would burst from her chest. Then Kade emerged again, half carrying, half dragging the terrified cow. He stumbled away from the barn just as part of the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. They stood together, breathing hard, watching the barn burn. There was nothing they could do to save it. The structure was old and dry, and the flames consumed it hungrily. "Are you hurt?" Helena demanded, her hands running over Kade's arms and chest, checking for injuries. "I am fine," he said, catching her hands. "Helena, I am fine." She looked up at him, and something broke inside her. The fear, the relief, the months of holding everything together by herself, all of it came crashing down. She burst into tears, and Kade pulled her against his chest, holding her tightly while she sobbed. "It is all right," he murmured into her hair. "We are all right. The animals are safe. That is all that matters." "He could have killed you," Helena choked out. "You could have died in there." "But I did not." Kade pulled back enough to look at her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Helena, I am not going anywhere. Do you understand me? It will take more than Marcus Thorn to run me off." She nodded, unable to speak, and then somehow his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft at first, gentle, but then it deepened. full of all the fear and relief and longing they had both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Helena rested her forehead against his chest. "I love you," she whispered. "I know it is too soon, and I know it is crazy, but I do." "It is not too soon," Kade said fiercely. "I have loved you since that first morning when our voices came together in song. I love you, Helena Kimball, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you." They stayed there, holding each other while the barn burned down to embers, and despite everything, Helena felt a strange sense of peace. She was not alone anymore. Whatever came next, they would face it together. At first light, they rode into Colfax together. Helena was done playing defense. It was time to take the fight to Marcus Thorne. They went straight to the sheriff's office, though Helena knew it was likely futile. Sheriff Porter was a heavy-set man with a drooping mustache and eyes that never quite met yours directly. He listened to their report of the barn burning with obvious disinterest. "You got any proof it was arson?" he asked. "We smelled kerosene," Kade said. "And it is quite a coincidence that my employer's barn burns down just days after Marcus Thorne threatened us." "Threatened is a strong word," Porter said. "I heard about your conversation in the store. Sounded to me like Mr. Thorne was offering friendly advice." "Friendly advice," Helena said bitterly. "Like his friendly advice that resulted in 3 dead cattle." "Now, Miss Kimball, we have been over this. You cannot prove those animals were poisoned. They might have eaten bad grass or drunk from a contaminated source." "All 3 of them?" Helena demanded. "And now the barn burns, and you expect me to believe it is all coincidence?" Porter shrugged. "Fires happen. This is dry country, maybe a spark from your stove caught on the breeze. In the middle of the night, stranger things have happened." Porter stood, clearly done with the conversation. "Unless you have actual evidence, there is nothing I can do. I suggest you be more careful in the future." Outside, Helena kicked at the dirt in frustration. "I told you, he is useless." "There has to be someone else," Kade said. "Someone in this town who is not under Thorne's thumb." Helena thought for a moment. "There is Dr. Brennan. He is independent, owns his own practice. And Father Miguel at the Mission Church. Thorne has no power over him." They spent the rest of the morning visiting both men. Dr. Brennan, a white-haired gentleman in his 60s, was sympathetic but cautious. "Everyone knows what Thorne is doing," he said quietly. "But knowing and proving are different things, and people are afraid. He has ruined men who opposed him, run them out of the territory penniless." "Then we need to not oppose him alone," Kade said. "How many other ranchers has he targeted?" "Several," Brennan admitted. "The Johnsons sold out last year after their wells were mysteriously fouled. The Chen family lost half their herd to mysterious illness. And just this spring, the Martinez Ranch had a suspicious fire. Were any of them able to prove Thorne was behind it? No. He is careful, uses intermediaries, makes sure he is never directly connected. But if several of us went to the territorial governor in Santa Fe, presented a pattern of harassment," Helena said, "that might be enough to trigger an investigation." Brennan looked thoughtful. "It might. But you would need those families to testify, and most of them are gone now. The few who remain are too frightened." Father Miguel, when they visited the small adobe mission church on the edge of town, was more encouraging. The priest was a young man, perhaps 30, with kind eyes and a firm set to his jaw. "Marcus Thorne is a cancer on this community," he said bluntly. "I have been documenting his abuses for months, hoping someone would stand up to him. If you are willing to go to Santa Fe, I will provide written testimony and I will help you find others who will do the same." "It is a long trip," Kade said. "We would be gone for over a week, maybe 2. Who will watch the ranch?" "I will," Father Miguel said immediately. and I will ask some of the young men from the mission to help. Thorn would not dare attack a priest directly. It would turn even his supporters against him. Helena felt the first real spark of hope she had experienced in months. When can we leave? I will need a few days to gather statements and documents, the priest said. And you will need time to prepare for the journey. Shall we say 1 week from today? They spent that week working harder than ever, making sure the ranch was secure and the animals would be cared for in their absence. Father Miguel brought 3 young men from the mission, hard-working boys in their late teens who treated the priest with obvious respect and were eager to help. As the day of departure approached, Helena found herself alternating between hope and fear. What if the governor would not listen? What if Thorn found out and struck while they were gone? But every time doubt crept in, she would look at Kade, see the confidence in his eyes and find her courage renewed. The night before they were to leave, Kade asked Helena to walk with him. They strolled down to the creek where the water ran silver in the moonlight. The night air was warm and smelled of sage and wildflowers. Whatever happens in Santa Fe, Kade said, I want you to know that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, Helena said softly. He took her hands, and in the moonlight his face was serious. I know we have not known each other long, but I also know what I feel. When we get back from Santa Fe, when all this is settled, I want to marry you, Helena, if you will have me. Helena's heart soared. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Helena felt like she was floating. They stood by the creek for a long time, making quiet plans for the future, imagining what their life would be like once Thorn was no longer a threat. They left at dawn the next morning, with Father Miguel's carefully compiled documents in their saddlebags and hope in their hearts. The journey to Santa Fe would take them across rugged territory, but Kade was an experienced traveler, and Helena had grown up in this land. They knew how to read the terrain, where to find water, how to avoid the worst of the heat. The first 2 days passed without incident. They traveled at a steady pace, camping at night under the vast New Mexico sky. Helena had never felt so free, so alive. Away from the constant threat of Thorn, riding across the open land with Kade at her side. She could almost believe in a future where they were simply a young couple in love, with nothing more pressing than the everyday concerns of ranch life. On the 3rd evening, as they made camp in a small canyon, Kade pulled out his harmonica. Helena had not known he played. The first few notes were tentative, finding the melody, but then he launched into a tune that was both mournful and hopeful. That is beautiful, Helena said when he finished. My father taught me, Kade said. It is one of the few things of his I have left. Play another, she requested. He did, and this time Helena recognized the melody. It was the song she had been humming that first morning, the one his mother used to sing. Without thinking, she began to hum along, and then to sing the words she remembered. Their voices blended with the harmonica, creating a sound that was both haunting and lovely. When the song ended, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to coals. Helena thought about how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks, how the arrival of one stranger had transformed her world. What are you thinking? Kade asked. That I am grateful, she said. For you, for this. For the chance at a different future than the one I thought I had. We will have that future, Kade promised. I swear it. They reached Santa Fe 6 days after leaving Colfax. The territorial capital was a bustling place, so different from the small frontier town they called home. Adobe buildings lined narrow streets, and the plaza was crowded with merchants and shoppers. The governor's office was in the Palace of the Governors, a long, low building that had stood since Spanish times. Getting an audience with the governor took 3 days of patient waiting and gentle persuasion. Finally, they were ushered into a large office where Governor William Pyle sat behind a massive wooden desk. He was a stern-looking man in his mid-40s, with the bearing of the military officer he had once been. Helena had never been so nervous in her life, but as she began to speak, laying out the pattern of harassment and intimidation that Thorne had engaged in, she found her voice growing stronger. Kade supported her testimony with his own observations, and then they presented Father Miguel's documents, which included sworn statements from several families who had been driven from the area. Governor Pyle read through everything carefully, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he set down the last paper and steepled his fingers. "This is concerning," he said. "But you must understand, I cannot simply remove a man from his property based on accusations. Even with these statements, much of this is circumstantial." "Then what can you do?" Helena asked, her heart sinking. "I can send a territorial marshal to investigate," Pyle said. "A man who answers to me, not to local authorities who might be compromised. If there is evidence to be found, Marshal Hayes will find it. And if your allegations prove true, Marcus Thorne will face justice." It was not everything Helena had hoped for, but it was more than she had dared expect. "Thank you, Governor. That is all we ask, a fair investigation." "Marshal Hayes will travel to Colfax within the week," the governor said. "In the meantime, I suggest you both be very careful. If Thorne is as dangerous as you say, he will not take kindly to outside interference." They left Santa Fe the next morning, riding hard for home. Helena was eager to get back to her ranch, to make sure Father Miguel and the animals were all right. But more than that, she was eager to start building the life she and Kade had dreamed of. They were 2 days from Colfax when they spotted the dust cloud behind them. Kade saw it first, his hand going to the rifle in his saddle boot. "Riders," he said quietly. "Coming fast." They urged their horses to greater speed, but the animals were tired from days of hard travel. The riders behind them were gaining ground. Helena's heart hammered in her chest. If Thorne had sent men after them, they were in serious trouble out here in the open. "There," Kade said, pointing to a cluster of rocks ahead. "We can make a stand there if we have to." They reached the rocks and dismounted, pulling their rifles free. There were 3 riders, Helena could see now, and they were definitely coming straight for them. She and Kade positioned themselves behind cover, rifles ready, as the riders drew closer. "Hold your fire," one of the riders shouted. "We are friends." As they drew near enough to make out features, Helena gasped. It was Samuel from the general store, along with 2 Mexican ranchers she knew slightly, the Garcia brothers who had a small spread south of town. The 3 men dismounted, keeping their hands visible. Samuel was out of breath, his face flushed. "Thank God we caught you," he panted. "Thorne knows. He knows you went to Santa Fe, and he knows why. He sent men to your ranch last night." Helena's blood ran cold. "Father Miguel, the boys from the mission." "They are all right," Samuel said quickly. "The priest got them out when he saw Thorne's men coming. But Miss Kimball, he burned your house. The whole thing, it is gone." Helena felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Her father's house, the place where she had grown up, where her mother's things still sat on the shelves, gone. Kade's arm came around her shoulders, solid and supporting. "What about the animals?" "The priest got them out too," Juan Garcia said. "They are safe at the mission, but Thorne is raging. He has his men out looking for you, and word is he is not planning to scare you off anymore. He means to kill you both." "Why did you come to warn us?" Helena asked Samuel. "You work for him." Samuel looked ashamed. "I have stood by and watched him hurt too many people, Miss Kimball. My conscience would not let me stand by any longer." When I heard what he was planning, I knew I had to do something. Thorn knows you are gone, Kade asked. Not yet, but he will soon. I had to tell my wife and she will keep the secret, but someone will notice. Then we cannot go back to Colfax, Helena said. Not yet. We need to wait for the marshal. There is an old line shack on our land, Diego Garcia offered. North of town, well hidden. You can wait there. We will bring you supplies and let you know when the marshal arrives. They rode together to the Garcia ranch, keeping off the main trails. The line shack was small and rough, not much more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was shelter. The Garcia brothers brought food and water, and Samuel returned to town to avoid suspicion, promising to get word to them as soon as the marshal arrived. Alone in the shack, Helena finally allowed herself to cry. All her father's work, her mother's memory, gone. Kade held her while she wept, stroking her hair and murmuring comforting words. We will rebuild, he said. We will make it better than before. Your father would want you to keep going, not give up. I am not giving up, Helena said fiercely, wiping her eyes. I am going to see Thorn pay for what he has done. And then we are going to go home and rebuild, and we are going to live a long, happy life just to spite him. Kade smiled and kissed her forehead. That is my girl. They waited 4 long days in the line shack. Juan Garcia brought news daily. The marshal had arrived in Colfax and was asking questions. He had already spoken to Father Miguel, to Dr. Brennan, to several townspeople. Word was that Thorn was worried, that his usual bluster was showing cracks. On the 5th day, Diego Garcia arrived with a broad smile on his face. The marshal has arrested Thorn, he said. Caught one of his men red-handed setting fire to the Chen family's barn. The man gave Thorn up in exchange for leniency, confessed to everything. Thorn is in custody and his men have scattered. Helena could hardly believe it. It is really over. The marshal wants to speak with you both to get your formal statements. But yes, Miss Kimball, it is over. They rode into Colfax in the bright light of morning. Townspeople lined the street, and to Helena's shock, they applauded as she and Kade passed. People she had thought were loyal to Thorn, or at least too frightened to oppose him, were cheering for his downfall. Marshal Hayes was a tall, rangy man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He took their statements carefully, nodding as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Thorn will stand trial in Santa Fe, he said. With the evidence we have, I expect he will spend a significant time in prison. His property and assets will be seized to compensate his victims. What about Helena's ranch? Kade asked. The house was burned and she has lost livestock. The territorial government has a fund for victims of criminal activity, Hayes said. She will be compensated. It will not be immediate, but she will receive justice. Helena felt tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. It was really over. The nightmare that had consumed her life for so long was finally ending. Father Miguel welcomed them at the mission with embraces and prayers of thanksgiving. The young men who had helped watch the ranch gathered around, excited to share the news that had spread through town. Even Sheriff Porter, looking sheepish and humbled, offered his congratulations and apologies. I should have stood up to him, Porter admitted. I am not proud of myself, Miss Kimball. Then do better from now on, Helena said simply. She and Kade went to look at what remained of her ranch. The house was indeed a total loss, nothing left but blackened timbers and ash. But the animals were healthy, the land was still there, and the creek still ran clear and cold. The barn was gone too, but those things could be rebuilt. It looks worse than it is, Kade said, his arm around her waist. We will need a new barn first, Helena said, her practical nature asserting itself. And we can live in the bunkhouse while we rebuild the main house. Kade said, smiling. I like the sound of that. The next few months were hard work, but it was the good kind of hard work, building something rather than just trying to survive. The Colfax community, freed from Thorne's influence and feeling guilty for their silence, rallied to help. Men came from all over the valley to help raise a new barn. Women brought food and supplies. Even Samuel closed his store for a week to help with the construction. The territorial compensation came through faster than expected, enough to buy lumber and materials for a new house. This one, Kade and Helena designed together, incorporating the best of the old with new ideas. It would be larger, with a proper bedroom and a real kitchen, and a porch where they could sit in the evenings. They were married in early September, in a simple ceremony at Father Miguel's mission church. Helena wore a dress that the women of Colfax had helped her sew, cream-colored calico with lace at the collar. Kade wore a new suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothes. As they stood before Father Miguel and exchanged vows, Helena thought about that morning months ago when she had been humming while milking her cow, alone and frightened and trying to be brave. She thought about the stranger who had joined her song and how that single moment had changed everything. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Father Miguel said, beaming. "You may kiss your bride." Kade swept Helena into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. Helena laughed against his lips, happier than she had ever been. The reception was held in the town plaza, with tables laden with food and musicians playing lively tunes. Everyone in Colfax turned out to celebrate, and Helena realized that she was no longer alone in this community. These were her people, her friends, and they would stand together from now on. As evening fell and the dancing began, Kade pulled Helena into his arms for the first waltz. They moved together naturally, as if they had been dancing together for years. Other couples joined them, and soon the plaza was full of swirling skirts and laughter. Later, after they had cut the cake and received more congratulations than Helena could count, Samuel approached them quietly. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for giving me the courage to do the right thing. I have bought the general store from Thorne's estate. I will run it honestly from now on, the way it should have been run all along." "I am glad," Helena said, squeezing his hand. "We all deserve second chances." Kade and Helena spent their wedding night in the newly finished house. It still smelled of fresh lumber and paint, and the furniture was sparse, but it was theirs. They lay together in their new bed, talking softly and making plans for the future. "I want children," Helena said, "at least 2 or 3. "I want whatever makes you happy," Kade replied, kissing her temple. "As long as I have you, I have everything I need." "We should get more cattle too," Helena continued, "now that we do not have to worry about them being poisoned. And we could expand the hay meadow, maybe buy the adjoining 40 acres from the Garcias if they are willing to sell," Kade chuckled. "Yes, dear, whatever you say, dear." Helena swatted his chest playfully. "I am serious." "I know you are," he said, capturing her hand and bringing it to his lips. "And I love that about you. Your strength, your determination, your refusal to give up. You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." "You just like my cooking," Helena teased. "That too," Kade admitted with a grin. The first winter of their marriage was mild, and they used the time to make more improvements to the ranch. Kade built new fences, strong and tall. Helena started a kitchen garden, planning ahead for spring planting. They bought 10 new head of cattle from a rancher in Texas, good breeding stock that would form the foundation of a larger herd. In February, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Kade one morning while he was splitting wood for the stove, unable to keep the news to herself any longer. He dropped the axe and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Put me down before you make me dizzy," Helena said, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Helena worked almost until the day she went into labor. Kade fussed over her constantly, trying to get her to rest more, but Helena was not one to sit idle. There was too much to do, too much to prepare. Their son was born on a warm October morning, delivered by Dr. Brennan with Kade holding Helena's hand through every moment. The baby was healthy and loud, with a thick shock of dark hair and his father's storm-gray eyes. "What should we name him?" Kade asked, cradling the tiny bundle with tender care. Helena thought for a moment. "Samuel," she said, "after the man who had the courage to help us when we needed it most." "Samuel Zimmerman," Kade said, testing the name. "I like it." Little Samuel was a joy, a happy baby who rarely cried and who watched the world with curious, intelligent eyes. Helena would sing to him while she worked, the same old songs her mother had sung to her, and Kade would play his harmonica in the evenings, making the baby coo and wave his tiny fists. Life on the ranch fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked hard during the day and spent the evenings as a family, talking and laughing and making plans. The herd grew steadily, and within 2 years they had doubled its size. Helena's garden flourished, providing vegetables that she canned and stored for winter. They bought chickens and a few pigs, expanding their little operation bit by bit. When Samuel was 2 years old, Helena became pregnant again. This time she had a daughter, born in the spring when the wildflowers were blooming across the valley. They named her Rose, for the wild roses that grew along the creek, and for Helena's mother, whose middle name had been Rose. "Now we have a matched set," Kade joked, looking at his 2 children with undisguised adoration. "I think I would like one more," Helena said thoughtfully, "to round out the family." "Then we will have one more," Kade agreed readily. He would have given her the moon if she asked for it. The third child, another son, arrived 2 years later. They named him Ezra, after Kade's father. He was the most rambunctious of the 3, constantly getting into mischief and making his parents laugh with his antics. Colfax continued to thrive without Thorne's poisonous influence. New families moved in, drawn by word of good land and an honest community. A school teacher arrived, a young woman from Boston who set up classes in the mission church until a proper schoolhouse could be built. Helena served on the committee to raise funds for the school, working alongside other ranch wives to organize socials and fundraisers. The years passed quickly, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved to read and showed an early talent for working with numbers. Rose was her mother's daughter, practical and determined, already helping in the garden by the time she was 5. And Ezra was pure energy, always running, always exploring, always asking questions. One evening when Samuel was 10, Rose was 8, and Ezra was 6, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It had become a tradition, this time of day when work was done and they could simply be together. "Mama," Rose asked, "how did you and Papa meet?" Helena and Kade exchanged a smile. "Well," Helena began, "I was milking our cow one morning very early before the sun was fully up. And I was humming a song my mother used to sing. And I heard the song as I was riding by," Kade continued. "It was the same song my mother used to sing to me when I was young, so I started singing along." "You sang together before you even met?" Samuel asked, intrigued. "We did," Helena said. "Our voices just fit together like they were meant to harmonize." "That is romantic," Rose sighed. "It is also a little strange," Ezra said pragmatically, making everyone laugh. "Maybe," Kade acknowledged. But sometimes the best things in life start out a little strange. "Tell us the rest," Samuel urged. So Helena and Kade told the story, taking turns and filling in details. They told about the trouble with Marcus Thorne, though they softened some of the scarier parts for the children's sake. They told about the ride to Santa Fe, the arrest, the rebuilding of the ranch. They told about their wedding and the early days of their marriage. "And now here we are," Helena finished, looking at her 3 children and her husband, her heart full to bursting. "With the best family anyone could ask for, and the best ranch," Ezra added. "Yes," Kade agreed, "and the best ranch." As the children ran off to play one last game before bedtime, Kade pulled Helena close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying here, fighting for this place instead of taking an easier path?" "Not for a single moment," Helena said firmly. "This ranch, this life, you and our children, it is everything I ever wanted. Even in the hardest times, I would not have chosen differently." "I love you, Helena Zimmerman," Kade said, kissing her softly. "And I love you," she replied. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the fading light. The ranch stretched out around them, peaceful and prosperous. The cattle grazed contentedly in the pastures, the chickens had settled in their coop, and smoke rose lazily from the chimney of their solid, well-built home. More years passed, bringing both joys and challenges, as life always does. There were hard winters when they worried about the cattle, and dry summers when they prayed for rain. Samuel grew into a fine young man and went away to college in Santa Fe, studying law with the intention of returning to help the territory's small ranchers. Rose fell in love with a cowboy from a neighboring ranch, a good man named Thomas who treated her with the respect and love she deserved. Ezra showed no signs of leaving, declaring that ranch life was the only life he wanted. Helena and Kade grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They worked side by side every day, whether it was mending fences or planning the season's planting or simply sitting together on the porch in the evenings. The harmony they had found that first morning never faded, whether they were singing together or simply existing in comfortable silence. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Samuel came from Santa Fe with his new wife, a smart young woman who worked as a teacher. Rose and Thomas arrived with their 2 young children, Helena and Kade's first grandchildren. Ezra was there, of course, having taken over most of the day-to-day running of the ranch as his parents grew older. Father Miguel, now gray-haired but still spry, presided over a renewal of vows in the same mission church where they had been married 2 decades before. The little church was packed with friends and neighbors, the entire community turning out to honor the couple who had helped reshape Colfax into a place of justice and opportunity. As Helena and Kade stood before the altar, repeating the vows they had made 20 years earlier, Helena thought about how much had changed since that morning when a stranger had joined her song. She had been alone then, frightened and desperate, facing threats she did not know how to handle. Now she stood surrounded by love, by family and community, by a life that had exceeded her wildest dreams. "I now pronounce you still married," Father Miguel said with a twinkle in his eye, and everyone laughed. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half the county. At one point, someone called for Helena and Kade to sing. They looked at each other and smiled, then began the song that had brought them together all those years ago. Their voices blended perfectly, even more richly than they had that first morning, seasoned now by years of love and life shared. Others joined in, harmonizing, until the whole gathering was singing together under the New Mexico stars. When the song ended and the applause died down, Kade stood and raised his glass. "To my wife," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet night, "who showed me what it means to have courage, to stand up for what is right, to never give up, who gave me a home and a family and a purpose, who gave me everything." "To Helena," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Helena felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. She stood and raised her own glass. "And to my husband," she said, "who heard me singing and never left my side, who stood with me through the darkest times and celebrated with me in the brightest, who made every dream I ever had come true." "To Kade." Everyone cheered. As the party continued around them, Helena and Kade slipped away for a quiet moment alone. They walked down to the creek, to the spot where he had proposed all those years ago. The water still ran silver in the moonlight, and the air still smelled of sage and wildflowers. "You remember the night I asked you to marry me?" Kade asked, taking her hand. "Every detail," Helena said. "I remember thinking that I had never been happier and wondering if it was possible to be that happy forever." "And," Kade prompted. "And I was wrong," Helena said with a smile, "because I have been even happier. Every year with you has been better than the last." They stood by the creek for a long time, holding hands and remembering, talking about the years behind them and the years still to come. They talked about grandchildren to spoil and a ranch to pass on to their children. They talked about growing old together, about rocking on the porch and watching sunsets and singing their old songs. "I would do it all again," Helena said finally. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear and doubt. I would do it all again for this, for us, for the life we built together." "As would I," Kade said. "You are my home, Helena. You always have been from that very first moment." They walked back to the party hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family and friends, to celebrate the love that had sustained them through 2 decades and would sustain them through all the years to come. The party eventually wound down, and guests began heading home or settling into spare rooms in the bunkhouse. Helena and Kade stood on their porch, waving goodbye to the last departing wagon, then turned to look at each other in the lamplight. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Zimmerman," Kade said. "Happy anniversary, Mr. Zimmerman," Helena replied. They went inside their home, the home they had built together from ashes and determination, and closed the door on another perfect day. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to prosper. Samuel established a successful law practice in Santa Fe, but returned to Colfax often, representing small ranchers and farmers, and ensuring they received fair treatment under the law. Rose and Thomas bought a ranch of their own nearby, and their children grew up playing with their cousins on both properties. Ezra eventually married a girl from town, the daughter of Samuel, the store owner, bringing the family full circle. Helena and Kade eventually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, though they never fully retired. They were always up early, often found in the barn or walking the property, checking on things with the experienced eyes of lifelong ranchers. But more and more, they left the heavy work to younger hands, content to advise and support rather than lead. They became fixtures in Colfax, respected elders of the community. Helena served on the school board for years, ensuring that all children in the valley had access to education. Kade trained young cowboys, passing on the skills and wisdom he had acquired over a lifetime. Together, they were living proof that love and determination could overcome any obstacle. On their 30th anniversary, Dr. Brennan, now ancient but still practicing, told them they were the healthiest couple their age he had ever seen. "Whatever you two are doing, keep doing it," he said with a smile. "We plan to," Kade assured him. Helena's hair turned silver, and Kade's face became deeply lined. But they still sang together every morning, their voices blending in harmonies that had only grown richer with time. They still held hands when they walked, still looked at each other with love and appreciation, still found joy in the simple act of being together. The ranch that had once seemed so fragile, so vulnerable to the whims of cruel men, now stood solid and strong, a testament to what could be built when two people worked together with love and purpose. The herd numbered in the hundreds, the fields were productive, and the buildings were sturdy and well-maintained. When Helena was 55 and Kade was 58, they celebrated their 33rd anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. The house was empty for once, all the children grown and living their own lives, though never far away. "You know what I am most proud of?" Helena asked as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, as had become their lifelong custom. "Tell me," Kade said. "That our children and grandchildren know what real love looks like," she said. "They have seen us work through problems together, support each other, never give up on each other. That is a legacy worth more than any amount of land or cattle." "You are absolutely right," Kade agreed. "Though the land and cattle are nice too." Helena laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "Always the practical one." "I learned from the best," he said, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and cattle lowed softly as they settled for the night. The sounds of the ranch, familiar and comforting, surrounded them like a blanket. "Sing with me," Helena said suddenly. "Which song?" Kade asked, though he already knew. "The one from that first morning," she said. Kade did not need to be asked twice. He began humming the melody, and Helena joined in, their voices weaving together in the gathering darkness. After all these years, after all the songs they had sung together, this one was still their favorite, the one that reminded them of where it all began. When the song ended, they sat holding hands, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. They were older now, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work and long life, but their love was as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger for having weathered so many seasons together. "I love you, Helena," Kade said softly. "I love you too, Kade," she replied. "Always and forever." They remained on the porch until full dark, then went inside to their comfortable home, to their shared bed, to sleep wrapped in each other's arms as they had done for more than 3 decades. Outside, the ranch slept peacefully under the New Mexico stars, a testament to courage, determination, and a love that began with a simple song on a summer morning long ago. The years continued to pass gently. They saw Samuel become a respected judge, his fairness and integrity known throughout the territory. They watched Rose's children grow strong and capable, ready to take on the challenges of ranch life. They saw Ezra transform the family ranch into one of the most successful operations in the county, always crediting his parents' teaching and example. Helena and Kade lived to see New Mexico become a state in 1912, celebrating with the rest of the territory as it officially joined the Union. They lived to see automobiles appear on the roads, though they themselves never learned to drive, preferring their faithful horses. They lived to see electricity come to Colfax, though they never quite trusted it the way they trusted a good oil lamp. Through it all, they remained devoted to each other, their love a constant in a changing world. Every morning, without fail, they sang together. Every evening they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. Every night they went to bed grateful for another day together. When Helena was 68 and Kade was 71, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The celebration was even larger than their 20th had been, with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathering from across the territory and beyond. The mission church could not hold everyone, so the celebration was held outdoors, in the valley where their ranch spread out green and beautiful. Father Miguel had passed on years before, but his successor, a young priest named Father Antonio, presided over another renewal of vows. As Helena and Kade stood before him, their hands clasped tightly together, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. 50 years ago, Father Antonio said, these two people made promises to each other. They promised to love, honor, and cherish each other through all the days of their lives. Looking at them now, seeing the life they have built, the family they have raised, the community they have served, I think we can all agree they have kept those promises magnificently. The applause was thunderous. Helena looked at Kade, at his lined face and silver hair, and thought he had never looked more handsome. Kade looked at Helena, at her gentle smile and wise eyes, and thought he had never loved her more. I now pronounce you still married, Father Antonio said, echoing the words Father Miguel had spoken 30 years earlier. The celebration lasted all day and into the night. There was music and dancing, stories and laughter. Their children spoke, sharing memories and thanking their parents for the example they had set. Their grandchildren performed a play they had written, dramatizing the story of how Helena and Kade had met, much to everyone's delight. As the sun began to set, Samuel stood and called for quiet. I would like to make an announcement, he said. As you all know, my parents have built something truly special here. This ranch is not just land and cattle. It is a legacy of hard work, integrity, and love. Today, I am proud to announce that this ranch has been officially designated as the Zimmerman Heritage Ranch, protected for future generations. It will remain in our family, a lasting testament to what two people can build when they love each other and never give up. The applause was overwhelming. Helena felt tears streaming down her face as her children and grandchildren gathered around, hugging and thanking her. Through it all, Kade's hand remained firmly clasped in hers. Later that evening, after most of the guests had departed and only family remained, Helena and Kade took one last walk down to their creek. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light, and the water sang its eternal song as it flowed over the rocks. We did well, Kade said quietly. We did, Helena agreed. Better than I ever dreamed possible. You remember being young and frightened, facing down Marcus Thorne and thinking you might lose everything? I remember, Helena said. And I remember a stranger joining my song and changing my life forever. That stranger loved you from the first moment, Kade said, and has loved you every moment since. I know, Helena whispered. I have felt that love every day of our life together. It has been the foundation of everything good that has happened. They stood by the creek for a long time, remembering and dreaming, grateful and hopeful. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of their family, multiple generations gathered under one roof, bound together by love and shared history. Before them, the creek continued its endless journey, constant and unchanging like their love for each other. Ready to go back? Kade asked eventually. Always, as long as I am going with you, Helena replied. They walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family, ready to celebrate the incredible life they had built together, ready for whatever years remained to them. The ranch spread out around them in the moonlight, beautiful and peaceful, a testament to two people who had heard a song together one summer morning and built a love that would last for all time. Helena Kimball Zimmerman and Kade Zimmerman lived several more good years together, always working side by side, always singing their songs, always grateful for the gift they had found in each other. When they finally passed, First Helena at 75 and then Kade just 6 months later at 78. They left behind a family that knew what true love looked like, and a community that had been shaped by their example. They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking their ranch, next to Helena's mother and father, under the big cottonwood tree where they had often sat together. The headstone was simple, bearing their names, dates, and a single line. Their voices harmonized perfectly from the first song to the last. The Zimmerman Heritage Ranch continues to thrive to this day, still owned by their descendants, still a testament to what love and determination can build. And sometimes, on quiet mornings just as the sun is rising, ranch hands swear they can hear two voices harmonizing in the distance, singing an old, old song about morning light and new beginnings.